Erythritol. Is it a deadly poison or is it a safe sugar substitute? We're going to talk about a new research study that's just been published and give you lots of information about erythritol, the history of it, the chemistry of it. Should you avoid it or should you use it as part of a proper human diet? And I'm going to tell you at the end of this video who should be worried about this and who should change their dietary practices based on this new study. So this is the study that was just published in Nature Medicine, which is a fairly prestigious journal, showing that there is a possible association between ingesting erythritol and major cardiovascular events such as heart attack, stroke, and death. Now, we're going to dive into this study and tear it apart a little bit and tell you exactly what it tells you and what you should do about that. But first, let's talk about erythritol just a little bit and what we know about it. So erythritol, here's the molecule, is actually found naturally in different things. It's found naturally in some mushrooms, in some fruits like watermelon, grape, pears, and also in any fermented food. Not all of them, but some of them, including wine, cheese, sake, and soy sauce. So this is why the big food manufacturers were able to get a GRAS rating, which is generally regarded as safe, is because it is a naturally occurring molecule in nature in small amounts. Your body actually makes erythritol from sugar in the pentose phosphate pathway in small amounts. Erythritol was discovered by a Scottish chemist by the name of Stenhouse back in 1848, and then it was isolated in 1852. In the 1950s, scientists found a small amount of erythritol in blackstrap molasses. Only in the 1990s was it ever mass-produced, starting in Japan, to replace sugar in people's everyday diets. And so, obviously, right off the bat, erythritol is not ancestrally appropriate. We've only been eating erythritol in any meaningful amount for just a few decades. When you eat or drink erythritol, it's absorbed by your small intestine and circulates in your bloodstream. Only about 10% of what you eat or drink makes it to your large intestine. And for some people, this can cause quite a bit of gastrointestinal distress, including cramping, nausea, watery stools, and flatulence. But for most people, they don't have these side effects. But what we know is that when you ingest erythritol, your blood levels of erythritol go up higher than they would be otherwise, in many cases up to 1,000 times what your normal physiological dose of erythritol would be. So right off the bat, that sounds a bit concerning, because if you increase the amount of anything in your bloodstream by 1,000 times, it's probably going to cause a problem. This includes water and carbon and hydrogen and everything. You don't want to increase the levels of anything in your bloodstream by 1,000x. So let's keep in mind why everyone's eating and drinking so much erythritol. It's because they're trying to replace sugar with it. And I'm going to talk more about this possible folly later in this video. But we know that sugar has a disastrous effect, starting in the mouth with the teeth, and then with basically virtually every other organ in your body through glycation. So I don't think that replacing sugar is bad, but maybe the degree with which you're replacing sugar may be your problem. There are actually several other studies published before this research paper that showed that erythritol had beneficial effects on endothelial function and other markers of cardiovascular risk. So I don't think that erythritol is all bad. It may perhaps be in the degree, as in the dose makes the poison. So the first claim that this paper makes is that there's a strong association between continuous erythritol consumption and major cardiovascular events like heart attack, stroke, and death. And this association appears to be relatively strong, 2 to 3 times the risk for people who consume the most. Now, this paper assumed that the average person in the United States is eating and drinking about 30 grams of erythritol daily. But when you look at the FDA's website, they say that the average consumption of erythritol is about 13 grams a day, and that 45 grams a day, which was what this study looked at, would be in the 90th percentile of ingestion. And so this would really apply to the people who are eating the absolute most erythritol on a daily basis. Now, there's no randomization in this study, so it absolutely cannot prove causation. It can only show a possible association. But the association that it shows seems to be more robust than many other observational studies that I've poo-pooed on this channel. So keep in mind that just because people who had major cardiovascular events while consuming a lot of erythritol, we cannot make the assumption that the erythritol caused those events. They're only associated with it. And indeed, many people who already have pre-existing risk factors for heart attack, like diabetes, like hypertension, metabolic syndrome, and obesity, are using erythritol more, trying to eliminate sugar, to improve those conditions. And so this could just be noise in the data, but not really telling us anything meaningful. Now, the authors did try to correct for such things as type 2 diabetes, hypertension, etc., but it's well known in epidemiological literature that perfect adjustment for such things is absolutely impossible. Now, as I said earlier, erythritol is rapidly absorbed into the bloodstream and can stay there for up to 2 to 3 days at very high levels, in some cases 1,000 times higher than the physiological level of erythritol. And I think this is the key issue here and what I'm going to talk about later in this video. The authors of this study also did 2 different mechanistic studies looking at human platelets in vitro, that means in a test tube or a petri dish. And when they added erythritol to this mixture, it actually made the platelets more sticky, more apt to coagulate, more apt to form a clot. So that looks like a viable mechanism that for people eating a lot of erythritol, it could increase the risk of heart attack, stroke, and death. The researchers also looked at the clotting time in mice carotid arteries, the time that it took to form a clot after the ingestion or the addition of erythritol to this mixture, and erythritol definitely decreased the amount of time that it took to form a clot. So again, to be clear, this paper only shows a possible association, and then it shows a couple of different mechanistic studies or parts of the study that show a possible mechanism, like, okay, so it looks like it's causing this, how might it cause that? And then in both of those mechanistic arms of this study, it looks like that it acts by increasing the clottiness or stickiness or ability to form a clot of platelets in the blood. And if you form an inappropriate clot in certain areas of your body, that equals a stroke or a heart attack or death. Now, let's talk about how this applies to your life. Is this a big deal? Should you get all the erythritol out of your house, or should you continue to eat erythritol and drink it and not worry about it? So from this study and from other studies that I've read about erythritol, what I think is going on here is that in some people who still believe that they need and deserve multiple sweet tasting things in their mouth each and every day. So you've stopped the sugar, and that's good. You need to stop the sugar and keep it stopped for the rest of your life. But if you replace it with excessive amounts of erythritol, it's probably going to increase your risk of a heart attack or a stroke. And so this really applies for people in the low-carb keto space who still believe they need a sweet treat in between meals, after every meal, a sweet drink to sip on all day. That's who this message is directed towards. Keep in mind that this study used supraphysiological levels of erythritol. These weren't just the normal amounts that you would have in your body. This is not the normal amounts that you would get from eating a mushroom or eating a watermelon. This was a super amount of erythritol. And we see that when you ingest this much erythritol, your blood level can go up to 1,000 times higher than it would be otherwise. That's probably going to make your platelets a little stickier. I don't think you should worry about erythritol in your toothpaste or your mouthwash. That's inconsequential. I do think that many of my friends in the low carb and keto space should worry about, oh, okay, so I'm having keto pancakes and keto syrup for breakfast, along with my eggs and bacon. That's a huge, huge load of erythritol. And then I'm having erythritol in my coffee, all day long. I'm having erythritol in my tea. I'm having erythritol in my protein, energy drinks, whatever. And then for lunch, I always have to have some keto fill in the blank dessert, another big hit of erythritol. And then for dinner, of course, I've got to have a little keto treat after that. And then I'm going to have some keto munchies as snacks in between. This could translate into a huge erythritol load in your daily diet, keeping your serum level of erythritol 1,000 times higher than it would be otherwise, causing your platelets to be stickier. And so I think the solution for this is for all of us to realize that the only reason you think you need something sweet with every meal and sweet in between and something sweet to drink is because we have been habituated to that. We have been brainwashed into thinking that we constantly need a sweet taste in our mouth when in fact we do not. And we see this very clearly in our carnivore friends and colleagues who have gotten virtually all sweeteners out of their diet, out of their mouth. And so they're going to be ingesting very little, if any, erythritol. So for those of you who occasionally have a erythritol sweetened beverage or an occasional erythritol sweetened keto treat, this study probably should not concern or worry you in any way. You should not be worried if you have erythritol in your toothpaste. But if you are one of these people who your pantry is full of erythritol sweetened keto treats, cookies, cakes, pies, pancakes, syrup, and your fridge is full of erythritol sweetened sugar-free beverages, then this study probably should concern you. And you should probably take a fresh look at your way of eating and your diet and say, you know, I'm a grown-up. I probably don't need something that tastes sweet every 5 minutes every day of my life, and start to wean those down and stop those so that just in case this turns out to be an actual mechanism in the human body, you're not going to be one of the very, very few keto people out there who has a heart attack or a stroke. I think that's the main take-home message from this. Now, there is some additional research going on. There's another arm of the study continuing, and we're going to get the benefit of that research at some future date. But what should you do today? Right now, I think you should minimize the erythritol-containing treats and drinks in your diet and in your life. First of all, you don't need that. Second of all, it could potentially be causing an increased risk of you causing harm to your overall health. Hope this video helps. And if you'd like to learn how to eat a very healthy, ancestrally appropriate ketogenic diet without all the keto sweeteners, then I've got a playlist that'll pop up right there called Keto 101 that talks about how you can eat a very healthy ketogenic diet without all the sweeteners. This is Dr. Barry. I'll see you next time.